The courtroom roared as cameras flashed, capturing every tremor of fear on Ethan Cole's face. Once Hollywood's golden boy, his jaw tightened while whispers tore through the crowd. A reporter shouted, "Is it true, Ethan? Did you deceive everyone?" His lawyer pressed a hand against his arm, urging calm, but the gavel cracked like thunder. Judge Margaret Hill's voice cut sharp. "Order. This trial is not a spectacle." Gasps erupted as evidence flashed on the screen. Leaked bank records, secret contracts, and betrayal etched in ink. Ethan muttered under his breath, "They don't know the half of it." The silence that followed was deadly, every eye fixed on the fallen star. The world watched, not with admiration, but hunger, waiting for the empire of lies to collapse. News networks flooded every screen with the breaking headline. Anchors spoke with grave tones. Ethan Cole, America's beloved leading man, accused of fraud and betrayal. Clips of his iconic roles flashed. The charming smile, the cinematic hero who once saved the day. Fans posted frantically online, disbelief spilling into hashtags and furious comments. Outside his mansion, cameras waited like wolves at the gates. A neighbor whispered to another, "He was always too perfect. Something had to be wrong." The empire of adoration now turned into suspicion. Ethan, once adored by millions, had become the world's favorite cautionary tale overnight. The chaos spread like wildfire across social media. Paparazzi swarmed his mansion gates while helicopters hovered above. Fans cried in the streets holding posters of his face, torn between loyalty and anger. Bloggers typed frenzied think pieces, each claiming they had always suspected. Ethan sat alone inside, blinds drawn, the hum of cameras outside rattling through the walls. He whispered to himself, "They never loved me. They loved what I pretended to be." His phone buzzed endlessly with unanswered calls. The empire he built on charm was crumbling faster than the ink on the headlines. Courtroom sketches flooded news broadcasts, etched lines of his weary face magnified into symbols of downfall. Legal analysts dissected every detail on primetime, predicting decades in prison. One host sneered, the hero was nothing more than a con man in disguise. Meanwhile, Ethan scrolled through endless feeds of betrayal. Former friends giving interviews, lovers recounting secrets, headlines screaming his name. His reflection in the glass trembled as he muttered, "They'll never understand the truth." For the first time, he saw his legacy not in red carpet flashes, but in chains and headlines. The world that once worshipped him now reveled in his collapse. News fans lined the streets, commentators branding him the greatest fraud Hollywood ever adored. Fans who once screamed for autographs now tore posters into shreds. Ethan sat in silence staring at the walls covered with old movie posters of himself, smiling, heroic, invincible. He whispered bitterly, "That man never existed." The opening storm had arrived, and it promised no escape. His empire was not just crumbling, it was being devoured, piece by piece, in full view of the world. Before the scandals, Ethan Cole's story was every dreamer's fantasy. Born in a small Midwest town, he worked odd jobs while chasing auditions. Casting director Olivia Harris once said, "He walked in and owned the room." Soon, his smile lit up billboards, his voice filled cinemas, and his charm captured millions. Crowds chanted his name at premieres, camera flashes turning his every step into legend. Ethan whispered then, "This is just the beginning." Boy from nowhere had become a star everywhere. His empire was built on light, not shadows, or so the world believed. Movie critics hailed him as the industry's savior, the actor who could embody both hero and heartthrob. His breakout role as a soldier in Iron Valor made him a household name. Co-star Claire Dawson laughed in an interview. He could charm the camera with just a glance. Magazine covers showcased his perfect jawline and effortless charisma. Brands chased him, plastering his face on ads from perfumes to luxury cars. Ethan smiled during one interview, "I'm living proof dreams come true." Yet in the glow of admiration, the first whispers of ego began to form. Success made Ethan untouchable. He bought a mansion in Beverly Hills, threw lavish parties where champagne never stopped flowing. Guests remembered him as dazzling, spinning tales that kept crowds laughing. His manager, Victor Shaw, once bragged he was magnetic. People revolved around him. Yet amid the glitter, darker patterns emerged. Friends whispered he demanded control, monitoring who entered his circle. One guest recalled him saying with a grin, "Everyone here is loyal, or they would be here at all." The star's charm was intoxicating, but its edges were sharp. Behind the glamour, Ethan's closest allies began to see his cracks. His assistant, Daniel Reed, often stayed late cleaning up chaos. He once confided, Ethan lived off attention. He needed it like air. In private, Ethan stared at his reflection, whispering, "They'll never take this away from me." The man on screen was adored, but the man in the mirror trembled. Daniel's silence was loyalty, but it was also complicity. Seeds of betrayal grew quietly in the dark, watered by the fear of losing everything. The public saw a flawless prince, but those near him saw shadows. Rumors of a controlling lover surfaced, whispers of a contract signed in desperation. His smile never wavered, but his eyes told stories of secrets. Actress Claire Dawson admitted later, he seemed untouchable, but he was already unraveling. Ethan once told a friend, "Love, fame, money, you can't trust any of it." His empire glittered on the outside, but beneath the shine, the ground had begun to crack. The doom was not far. It had already begun. The first public crack appeared when Ethan Cole stumbled from a nightclub, cameras capturing every faltering step. Tabloids spun the images into scandal, headlines screaming, "Hollywood's prince turns mess." His publicist, Laura Grant, insisted, "He's exhausted, not reckless." Yet the footage told another truth. Glassy eyes, slurred words, his hand clutching Daniel Reed's shoulder as if gravity itself betrayed him. Fans scrolled in disbelief, some defending, others mocking with venom. Ethan whispered to Daniel, "They'll twist this like they always do." But the world wasn't twisting, it was watching, hungry as the man who once embodied perfection revealed his flaws under neon lights. Inside his mansion, Ethan's empire shook. Victor Shaw, his manager of over a decade, hurled contracts across the desk, shouting, "We are drowning in scandal, Ethan!" Ethan's voice cut back sharp, "Without me, you're nothing." Daniel Reed lingered silently, clutching folders, loyalty fraying with every venomous word. Isabella Cruz leaned on the velvet chair, sipping wine with a smirk, whispering, "Control the story, or it will swallow you whole." Shadows stretched across the grand room, and with every sentence, bonds weakened. Ethan once inspired devotion, but now suspicion and resentment filled the air. His empire wasn't crumbling from the outside, it was rotting from within. The betrayal sharpened when Claire Dawson, Ethan's former co-star, stepped into a talk show studio. Under studio lights, she spoke with quiet conviction. "He is reckless, manipulative, and dangerous." Fame consumed him. Clips followed, leaked videos of Ethan shouting at staff, his voice echoing in rage. On couches across America, fans gasped, hearts torn between disbelief and grim satisfaction. Ethan, watching from his mansion, hurled the remote, his voice cracking, "Lies, all of it lies." Yet Claire's calm words drowned his protests. The mask that had dazzled the world was no longer slipping. It was torn apart, frame by frame, in front of millions. Soon, the betrayal spread beyond interviews. Former friends sold recordings, Ethan shouting about money, threatening to cut ties. One tabloid screamed, "Ethan Cole's mask finally falls." Crowds gathered outside his gates, fans split into enemies and defenders. Some held signs reading, "Truth," others demanded, "Justice." Inside, Ethan stood by the window, hood shadowing his face. "They're tearing me apart piece by piece," he whispered. Daniel Reed, drained, muttered, "Or maybe you handed them the knife." It wasn't strangers pulling him down anymore. It was betrayal from those who once swore loyalty, now cashing in his secrets for headlines. One night, as the storm outside grew louder, Ethan's phone buzzed. A voice on the other end was calm, deliberate. "We know what you did, and it won't stay buried." His breath caught. "Who is this?" he asked, voice trembling. The reply was silence. Then the line went dead. He sat frozen, staring at the glowing screen, his reflection warped in the black glass. Outside, the world screamed about scandal, but this was something darker. Secrets were no longer safe. Ethan whispered to himself, "This is the end." But in truth, it was only the beginning. The door had slammed shut, and nothing would ever be the same again. The leaked phone call was only the beginning. Days later, a journalist named Sarah Mitchell revealed documents linking Ethan Cole's charity foundation to fraudulent accounts overseas. Her voice shook on live television. Millions raised for children's hospitals never reached them. The money vanished into shell companies. The nation gasped. Ethan sat frozen, staring at the broadcast. Isabella Cruz whispered, "They finally found it." He snapped, "Shut up, this isn't true." But deep down, his silence confessed guilt. The world realized the scandal wasn't about broken promises or reckless nights. It was crime, vast, deliberate, and unforgivable. Reporters uncovered more, tracing the funds back to Ethan's inner circle. Offshore accounts tied directly to Victor Shaw's signature appeared in headlines. When confronted, Victor shouted, "Don't drag me into this!" Ethan hissed back, "You signed every deal." Daniel Reed stood frozen, realizing he had unknowingly carried documents sealing the fraud. Isabella Cruz laughed softly. "You thought you were untouchable." Ethan's empire of admiration collapsed into suspicion of calculated theft. He had not only betrayed fans but stolen from the vulnerable, and there was no stage big enough to hide it anymore. The FBI stormed into Ethan's mansion with warrants. Neighbors filmed as armed agents marched past the iron gates. Agents seized computers, files, and drives. One agent declared, "Mr. Cole, you are under investigation for fraud and embezzlement." Ethan tried to protest, "This is a mistake." Cameras captured every second, broadcasting live. Crowds outside cheered as the mighty fell. In that moment, the man once adored as a hero was no longer an actor. He was a suspect. The fall wasn't just public, it was catastrophic, and it left no illusion standing. The silent witness emerged. Anna Miller, once a maid in Ethan's home. She testified to investigators that she saw Isabella Cruz exchanging documents with strangers late at night. Her trembling words were clear. They were laundering money through the foundation. Her confession cracked the case wide open. Isabella stared coldly at Anna across the courtroom hall, whispering, "You've just signed your own sentence." The world learned that the betrayal was not only Ethan's, it was orchestrated with allies he thought he controlled. The empire of lies had architects in every corner. The mask was gone. The public no longer debated scandals. They stared into the reality of crime. News anchors declared, "This is bigger than Hollywood gossip. This is theft, betrayal, and conspiracy." Ethan whispered to himself, "They'll destroy me." For the first time, he was right. His fans felt betrayed, charities collapsed, and former friends came forward one by one. The twist was not only shocking, it was devastating. The hero America adored was not fallen. He had always been living in darkness. And now, the shadows had finally swallowed him whole. The courthouse steps erupted in chaos as Ethan Cole arrived in handcuffs. Reporters shouted questions, cameras firing like gunfire. One yelled, "Ethan, do you regret it?" His lawyer Richard Hale barked, "No comments." Ethan's face was pale, lips pressed tight, his once famous smile gone. Fans who once screamed his name now cursed, "Fraud, liar." He whispered to himself, "They want blood." The red carpet had turned to concrete, the spotlight now a searchlight. His fall wasn't cinematic. It was brutal, real, and witnessed by millions, live. Inside the courtroom, the silence was suffocating. Judge Margaret Hill raised her gaze, voice sharp. "Mr. Cole, you stand accused of fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. Ethan swallowed hard, replying softly, "Not guilty." Gasps rippled. Prosecutor Linda Perez thundered, "We will show he built his empire on lies." Screens lit with evidence, bank transfers, hidden ledgers, testimonies. Every word landed like a hammer. Ethan stared at the documents, whispering, "They don't understand." But the faces watching weren't fooled. They saw not a star, but a thief exposed under oath. The betrayals cut deepest when Isabella Cruz testified. In a calm voice she declared, "He orchestrated everything. I warned him, but he wouldn't stop." Ethan's eyes widened, rage trembling beneath his skin. He whispered hoarsely, "Liar!" The jury scribbled notes as Isabella smirked, sipping water slowly. Reporters tweeted instantly, headlines flashing, "Lover turns against Cole." Daniel Reed buried his face in his hands, realizing silence had chained him to the collapse. Ethan's empire wasn't just burning. It was being torched by the very woman he once trusted most. Evidence piled higher. Former assistant Daniel Reed was forced to testify. His voice cracked as he admitted, "I carried documents. I never asked questions." Ethan looked at him with betrayal, whispering, "You too?" Daniel's eyes filled with tears. "I was loyal, but I was blind." The courtroom buzzed, every spectator sensing history unraveling. Judge Hill pounded her gavel. "Order!" Ethan's empire collapsed in slow motion, each alley's words another dagger. This was no trial of law alone. It was a public execution of reputation, legacy, and identity. Finally, the verdict arrived. The jury foreman stood, voice steady, "Guilty on all counts." The words echoed like thunder. Ethan's shoulders slumped, his empire officially buried. Gasps filled the courtroom. Outside, reporters broke the story instant. Judge Hill declared, "Sentencing will follow, but this man's reign is over." Ethan stared blankly, lips parting only to whisper, "It's just the beginning of my ruin." The cameras captured that broken moment. The world didn't cheer a victory of justice. It celebrated the destruction of a man once adored, now condemned forever. Ethan Cole's mansion, once filled with laughter and flashing lights, stood hollow. Chandeliers gathered dust, pools reflected only silence. The gates that once blocked paparazzi now hung rusted, abandoned. A neighbor whispered, "It's like a graveyard." Inside, posters of Ethan's movies curled at the edges, peeling off the walls. He sat in the corner of the living room, staring at nothing, muttering, "All of it's gone." The empire he built brick by brick had turned into ruins of glass, stone, and shame. There were no cheers now, only echoes of what once was. Once loyal fans now ignored him. On city walls, his movie posters were torn, faces defaced with red spray paint spelling fraud. Streets that once erupted in cheers now passed in silence. In a cafe, a group whispered, "I loved him once, now I can't stand his face." Ethan scrolled through social media, thousands of comments screaming betrayal. He whispered, "They never knew me." The silence of forgotten fame cut deeper than headlines. Fame had been his heir, and now he was suffocating in the absence of it. In prison visits, Daniel Reed came once, eyes filled with guilt. "I never wanted this," Daniel whispered. Ethan glared back, "You chose survival over loyalty." Silence stretched heavy between them, the bond once unbreakable now buried under lies. Daniel's hands trembled on the glass divider as he muttered, "I'm sorry." Ethan leaned closer, voice low, "Sorry doesn't fix ruins." Daniel walked away, leaving Ethan staring at his reflection in the scratched glass. Even the last thread of loyalty had snapped. Isolation was complete. On late-night television, analysts dissected the ruins of his career. Linda Perez, once his prosecutor, now a media guest, stated, "His fall shows the cost of deception." Clips of Ethan's past interviews rolled, his smile once a beacon, now a symbol of fraud. Across the nation, the public nodded, forgetting the love they once gave. Ethan sat in his cell, listening to the TV in the background, whispering, "I'm still here." But outside he was gone, erased, his name a warning carved into history. Fame had not saved him. It had destroyed him. Nights were the cruelest. Ethan lay awake in silence, haunted by memories of flashing lights, cheers, and red carpets. The echoes mocked him. He whispered into the dark, "I was their hero, and now I'm their warning." The cell was cold, the walls unforgiving. Beyond the bars, the world moved on. His name still trended, not in admiration, but as a cautionary tale. The empire was ash, his throne turned to stone. Yet in his hollow eyes, a faint spark lingered, not hope, but bitterness. Revenge whispered quietly, waiting for its chance. The prison gates groaned as they swung open, and Ethan Cole stepped into a gray dawn that felt colder than steel bars. Mist clung to the ground, curling around his feet, like chains that refused to let go. Reporters surged forward, microphones thrust like spears, voices overlapping into a roar. "Do you regret it? Are you sorry? What will you say?" His lawyer Richard Hale snapped, "No questions," as he tried to shield him, but the flashes struck Ethan's face like lightning. The boy who once walked red carpets to screams now trudged forward to jeers of fraud and liar. His hair was thin, his skin drawn, the glow of stardom erased. He muttered, his lips barely moving, "They'll never forgive me. They'll never forget." And in that silence, louder than any headline, Ethan knew this was not freedom. It was exile under a merciless spotlight. When Ethan returned to his Beverly Hills mansion, the silence inside was suffocating. Dust floated like ash from a fire long burned out. Chandeliers sagged, their crystals dulled, cobwebs swaying in the stale air. White sheets draped over leather chairs and mahogany tables like burial cloths. The once sparkling pool outside was stagnant, coated with leaves, the surface a dark mirror of decay. Ethan wandered slowly through the halls, footsteps echoing like ghostly applause. He stopped before a cracked Iron Valor poster, the film that made him eternal once. His trembling fingers traced the smiling face of his younger self, still vibrant, unbroken. "That man is dead," he whispered, his voice rasping against the silence. The mansion wasn't a palace anymore. It was a tomb, and every shadow was a reminder of a kingdom that had already buried its king. On televisions across the country, Ethan's downfall replayed in endless loops. News anchors tore him apart, their voices sharp. One commentator sneered. He was not betrayed by others, he betrayed himself. The screen flickered with images of Ethan in handcuffs, yelling at staff, glaring across the courtroom. Clips of Isabella Cruz's icy testimony rolled again and again, her smirk now infamous. In living rooms, parents shook their heads, telling children, "This is what happens when lies build your life." Kids who once idolized him, who dressed as his characters on Halloween, now ripped posters from their walls. Ethan sat in a dim motel room, the flickering TV casting him in a sickly blue glow. Takeout containers piled on the table, the air thick with grease and failure. His whisper cracked through the silence. "I'm still alive, but to them I don't exist anymore." His empire hadn't only collapsed, it had been rewritten as a cautionary tale carved into the bones of culture. One stormy night, Ethan walked the city like a ghost. Rain hammered the pavement, soaking through his thin jacket. Umbrellas bobbed past him, strangers hurrying, no one recognizing the man once immortalized on magazine covers. He whispered bitterly, "I was their hero. Now I'm invisible." The city lights bled into puddles, neon reflections breaking his face into warped fragments. He crouched by one puddle, staring at himself. Distorted, cracked, erased. Every raindrop shattered the image further until nothing remained whole. Once, his smile commanded attention. Now, no one even glanced at him. He staggered forward, water filling his shoes, muttering, "They fed on me, and I gave them the fire." The storm outside drenched his body, but the storm inside consumed his soul. Fame had abandoned him, but its ghost still clung, mocking him with every shadow. The end came in silence. Ethan sat at a motel desk, a dim lamp casting a weak halo over him. Crumpled papers carpeted the floor, filled with half-finished sentences, apologies no one would ever read. His voice cracked as he muttered, "In the end, it wasn't my enemies, it was me." Ink blurred beneath his tears, words dissolving before they could be finished. He crushed the page, adding it to the growing grave of confessions at his feet. Outside, neon lights flickered against rain-streaked glass, the city alive, indifferent. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling, chest rising and falling with slow exhaustion. His whisper broke into the void. The story's over. But outside, the world still fed on his ruin, dissecting, replaying, never letting go. Fame had made him eternal. Not in glory, but as a ghost chained forever to betrayal. Ethan Cole was no longer a man. He was a warning carved in silence, his legacy not remembered, but feared.